Hi, this is Kendall Boyson, professional life and recovery coach, and you're listening to Encouragementology, the practice of instilling hope. Hi there. Thanks for joining me. On this show, we're exploring the psychology of visibility and asking why some of us instinctively step forward while others choose to stay safely in the background. Have you ever been in a room where a question was asked and you felt that internal nudge? That tiny spark that said, raise your hand. And in that same moment, you felt the counterforce. The voice that whispered, don't. What if you're wrong? What if it's awkward? What if it's easier to just let someone else speak? I've always noticed something about myself. I'm not wired to go with the flow. I don't sit comfortably in the middle of the pack. When I see a path, I start looking for how to elevate it, improve it, stretch it, add value to it. Not because I need applause every 5 minutes, although I won't pretend I dislike a gold star, but because I feel energized by impact, by change, by movement. And I've also noticed something else. Not everyone is wired that way. Some people are incredibly content flying under the radar. They do their work, they stay steady, they avoid friction, they don't volunteer for the spotlight. And I found myself wondering, is that the personality? Is that fear? Is that wisdom? Is that waiting? Today, I want to explore what drives us toward visibility or safety. Because this is not about judging one another. It's about understanding our wiring and maybe gently stretching it. At its core, this conversation is about visibility. Visibility is the willingness to be seen, heard, and known. It's raising your hand, offering the idea, starting the business, sharing the opinion, taking the lead. Safety, on the other hand, is the instinct to preserve comfort, to avoid unnecessary friction, to minimize exposure, to stay in the zone where rejection feels less likely. Neither is inherently wrong, but they come from different internal drivers. Some of us are motivated by impact. We see a problem and think, I can fix that. We see a gap and think, I can fill that. There is energy in forward motion. Others are motivated by stability. They see potential conflict and think, is it worth it? They calculate risk more carefully. They may prioritize harmony over visibility. Here's the real question. Are we choosing visibility or safety intentionally? Or are we defaulting to it unconsciously? Because if you're wired to step forward, you might assume everyone should. And if you're wired to stay quiet, you might assume stepping forward is ego-driven. Both assumptions can miss the deeper truth. When we talk about visibility, it's easy to oversimplify it. We might label someone as confident or shy, bold or passive, leader or follower. But human motivation is rarely that tidy. Susan Cain, in her book Quiet, challenges the cultural assumption that the loudest voice is the most valuable. She writes, there is zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. That line always makes me pause. Because for me, I was always the loudest and the last one talking. Because we live in a culture that often rewards speed, volume, and visibility, we notice the person who speaks first. We promote the person who self-advocates. We applaud the person who steps into the spotlight. But that doesn't mean the spotlight holds all the brilliance. Some people process internally. They refine ideas before sharing them. They're less interested in being first and more interested in being thoughtful. Their strength is depth, not dominance. Now, on the other side of this, organizational psychologist Adam Grant has studied what he calls originals, the people who challenge norms and initiate change. Interestingly, his research found that many of these individuals are not reckless risk takers. In fact, they often manage risk carefully in other areas of their lives. They step forward strategically. So stepping up is not necessarily impulsive, and staying quiet is not necessarily fear-based. But there is another layer. Brené Brown defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Visibility requires all three. When you raise your hand, you risk being wrong. When you offer an idea, you risk rejection. When you take the lead, you risk criticism. Not everyone has the same tolerance for that emotional exposure. And here is where wiring and experience collide. If you grew up being rewarded for achievement, you may associate visibility with safety. Being seen equals being valued. If you grew up in an environment where standing out led to criticism or conflict, you may associate invisibility with safety. Staying small equals staying protected. Neither response is random. They are adaptive. Psychologists talk about approach motivation and avoidance motivation. Some people are wired to move toward opportunity. Others are wired to move away from threat. Both systems are useful. Both keep us alive. But in modern environments, they show up in meetings, friendships, and workplaces. The approach-driven person thinks, there is an opportunity here. The avoidance-driven person thinks, what could go wrong here? Both perspectives matter. But here's the important question. Are you choosing your response, or is your nervous system choosing it for you? If you always step forward, it's because you genuinely want impact, or because you feel uncomfortable unless you're in motion. I think I'm a bit of both. If you always step back, is it because you're content contributing quietly, or because you fear the friction that might follow? And let's bring compassion into this. Some people who fly under the radar are deeply satisfied. They don't need applause to feel fulfilled. They measure success internally. They contribute in steady, reliable ways that are easy to overlook but essential. And some people who stay quiet are not satisfied at all. They're waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel confident, waiting for someone to invite them. Meanwhile, some people who step forward are driven by purpose. They genuinely want to solve problems and help others. And some who step forward are chasing validation without even realizing it. The behavior may look the same on the outside. The motivation underneath can be completely different. That's why this conversation is not about judging boldness or praising restraint. It's about understanding your why. Because awareness creates choice, and choice creates growth. Okay, let's make this personal. I want you to picture a moment where you had the option to step forward or stay quiet. Maybe it was a meeting. Maybe it was a family conversation. Maybe it was a social setting where an idea popped into your head. What did you do? Did you lean in or did you hold back? Now here's the more important question. Why? Not the polished answer, the real one. If you leaned in, what were you feeling? Excitement? Responsibility? A sense that you could help? Or maybe a subtle fear that if you didn't speak up, you wouldn't be noticed. If you held back, what were you feeling? Peace? Contentment? Or was it tension? A quick calculation about whether it was worth the risk or not. Let's go a layer deeper. When you imagine stepping forward, what is the worst case scenario your mind offers you? Embarrassment? Rejection? Conflict? Being misunderstood? And when you imagine staying quiet, what is the worst case scenario there? Regret? Being overlooked? Feelings of being underutilized? Watching someone else say what you were thinking? Both paths carry risk. We just tend to focus on one. Here's something else to consider. If you are someone who constantly flies under the radar, ask yourself gently, am I genuinely satisfied here? Or am I waiting for permission, waiting for confidence, or waiting for someone else to notice me? And if you're someone who constantly steps forward, ask yourself, am I making room for others? Or do I unconsciously equate visibility with value? Again, this is not about changing who you are. It's about expanding your range. What would it look like for you to stretch 1 degree outside your default? If you're quiet, could you share one idea this week without overthinking it? If you're visible, could you intentionally create space for someone else to contribute? The goal is not personality change, it's self-awareness. Because once you see your pattern clearly, you're no longer at its mercy. You get to decide when to shine brightly in the square and when to illuminate quietly in the workshop. That is real power. So, what do we actually do with this? Because awareness is powerful, but growth requires movement. And the goal here is not to become someone else, it's to expand your range. So here are 4 ways to practice that this week. Are you ready? First, identify your default setting. Are you someone who instinctively steps forward or someone who instinctively steps back? Remember, there's no wrong answer here, but clarity matters. You can't stretch what you don't see. Second, stretch 1 degree beyond your default. If you tend to stay quiet, choose one low-risk moment to raise your hand. Share one idea, ask one question. Not to perform or to impress, just to participate more fully. And if you tend to step forward quickly, try pausing. Count to 5 before speaking. Invite someone else. Say, I would love to hear your take. Leadership is not always being first. Sometimes it's being spacious. Third, reframe friction. Many people avoid visibility because their fear of conflict. But healthy friction is often a sign of growth. Disagreement doesn't mean danger. It often means diversity of thought. If you can tolerate a little discomfort, you expand your influence. At the same time, if you're highly visible, notice where you are unintentionally creating unnecessary friction. Are you pushing because it truly serves the outcome, or because movement feels better than stillness? Fourth, define what impact means to you. Impact doesn't always require a spotlight. It might mean mentoring quietly, supporting consistently, building something behind the scenes, or it might mean standing up and advocating publicly. Impact is not about volume. It's about intention. And here's something important. If you're quiet and satisfied, that's beautiful. Don't let culture convince you that you need to perform extroversion to matter. But if you are quiet and restless, that's a signal. And if you're bold and purpose-driven, that's powerful. But if you're bold and exhausted, that's also a signal. This is about alignment. Are your actions aligned with your values or just with your wiring? Because wiring can be stretched. Values should be honored. Growth doesn't require a personality transplant. It requires a willingness to experiment. One small stretch this week could shift how you see yourself. And sometimes that's all it takes. The A side is the familiar story we all know, but the B side, that's where the deeper tracks live. The A side says, be bold, raise your hand, step up, stand out. The B side says, not everyone who is quiet is playing small. Some people who fly under the radar are deeply secure. They don't need external validation to feel valuable. They're not waiting for applause. They're building quietly. They're contributing steadily, and they're content without a spotlight. And that is strength. But here's another layer. The A side says, if you want more, you have to go get it. The B side says, some people were taught that going after more comes at a cost. Maybe they learned that standing out brought criticism, or leadership meant extra responsibility without extra support. Maybe visibility felt unsafe, so invisibility became protection. And then there's another direction. The A side says leaders take initiative, but the B side says sometimes high visibility is not courage, it's control. Sometimes stepping forward constantly is a way to avoid stillness. Sometimes being first to speak keeps us from sitting with uncertainty. And sometimes leading everything keeps us from feeling overlooked. That one can sting a little. Because boldness can be purpose-driven, but it can also be approval-driven. And neither the quiet nor the visible are immune from insecurity. Here's the deeper truth. If you're always the loudest voice in the room, you may unintentionally silence others. If you're always silent, you may unintentionally withhold something valuable. Both patterns can limit impact. The mature move is flexibility. Can you step forward when your voice is needed? And can you step back when someone else needs the space? The most powerful people I've seen are not the ones who dominate every room. And they're not the ones who disappear into the background. They're the ones who can read the room and respond intentionally. Sometimes they shine, sometimes they light up, and sometimes they know the difference. That is the deeper track. There's a story about a town divided by a wide river. Want to hear it? For years, the only way across was a small, unsteady boat. Crossing required courage. You had to volunteer to go first. You had to trust the current, and not everyone liked that feeling. One day, a woman stood at the edge of the river and said, "We need a bridge." Some people nodded politely. Others shrugged. A few thought, "That sounds complicated. That sounds risky. What if it fails?" But she could not unsee the problem. So she began gathering wood, sketching ideas, speaking up at the town meetings. She was visible. She was loud about it. She endured criticism. She endured doubt. And slowly, people began to join her. But here's the part that often gets overlooked. While she spoke and organized and rallied the town, there were others who worked quietly. One man measured the riverbanks every morning at sunrise. A young woman shaped beams in her father's workshop. An older craftsman reinforced the joints behind the scenes. They didn't speak in meetings. They didn't stand up at the river's edge announcing progress. But without them, there would have never been a bridge. Months later, when the bridge was complete, the town gathered to celebrate. Many praised the woman who first declared the need. They thanked her for her courage and her voice. She smiled and said, "I may have pointed to the river, but I did not build this alone." The bridge stood because someone was willing to speak up. And it stood because others were willing to build quietly. Neither role was more important. The river needed both. And so does every room you walk into. Some bridges are built by voices that echo across the square. Some are built with steady hands that no one sees. But impact requires both, the one who says, "Let's go," and the one who says, "I'll help." And the wisdom is knowing which role is yours in any given moment. As you picture that bridge standing over the river, I want you to consider where you naturally place yourself. Are you the one pointing at the river saying we need something different? Or are you the one quietly shaping the beams in the workshop? And before we go further, if you want to explore this more deeply, I've created a 5-day journaling companion for this episode. It's designed to help you identify your default wiring and gently stretch it with intention. You can download that and walk through this step by step. But for now, let's reflect together. One, where do I naturally position myself in group dynamics? Do I tend to speak first or wait? Do I feel energized or drained by visibility? What early experiences may have shaped this tendency? 2. Where might I be shrinking unnecessarily? Is there a space where my voice could add value? What specific fear holds me back? What is one small step that would stretch me safely? 3. Where might I be overextending? Am I stepping in before others have the chance? Do I equate being visible with being valuable? What would it look like to lead by creating space? As you journal, don't judge your wiring. Just observe it. You're not trying to become louder or quieter. You're trying to become more intentional. Growth means stepping onto the bridge, and sometimes it means reinforcing it quietly from underneath. Both are powerful, and both deserve reflection. So let's take a step back for a moment. This conversation was never about deciding which personality is better. It was never about ranking boldness or quiet contribution. Again, it's about awareness. Don't you want to know? Some of you are naturally wired to step forward. You see opportunity and you move towards it. You feel alive when you're building, solving, improving, leading. That's not ego. That can be purpose. And then some of you are naturally wired to observe first. You think deeply. You process. You contribute steadily and without fanfare. This is not weakness. This can be wisdom. As you reflect on what we've talked about, think about it. Are you choosing your position or defaulting to it? If you always speak, are you leaving room to listen? If you always stay quiet, are you withholding something valuable? Growth doesn't require you to abandon your wiring. It invites you to expand it. So stretch where you're rigid. Lean in where you usually lean back. Lean back where you usually rush forward. The bridge stands because someone was willing to speak up, but it also stands because someone was willing to build quietly. You may play different roles in different seasons, and that flexibility is strength. The goal is not visibility for its own sake. The goal is contribution that aligns with who you're becoming, and that requires intention. If you want to share Encouragementology with a friend who needs to know they're not alone in this journey of self-discovery, you can visit encouragementology.com or anywhere you stream your content to receive this episode and all others. Check out the show notes for the 5-day journaling companion and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional encouragement throughout the week. So I challenge you. This week, stretch your natural wiring by one intentional step. If you usually stay in the background, raise your hand once and let your voice be heard. If you usually step forward, pause once and create space for someone else to shine. Notice how it feels not to judge it, but to learn from it. Small stretches build confidence, compassion, and clarity. I know you can do it. Thank you for listening to Encouragementology with Kendall Boyson, where we find positive ways to handle some of life's challenges.
I stumbled through until the path was clear. That's when I found you and how I wound up here. All I needed was a rock that I could lean on. All you needed was some wind beneath your wings. We might be seeing things from different points of view, but that don't mean a thing. You and I, we were meant to be. I was made for you, you were made for me. So let it happen naturally. Things will work out fine, just you wait and see. Sat across my lap one summer night. There was only one star out, but it was shining bright. So I held you in my arms with all my might. It felt good to be in love again. I didn't want that night to end, but all I needed was a little motivation.